So by now you must have seen at a few places that sometimes you might get the values of props and state at some places which are outdated, which means that those values are not current or the latest one, rather they are old values. While you might think that this is a bug, but generally when you are using hooks and functional components, this is a common behavior and this is how it is designed. In that sense, you can say that this is not a bug, this is a feature. In this video here at this place, we are going to discuss that why that is the case, and we will understand that in detail, and what are the solutions, and if you want to have different behavior, then how to achieve that. Okay, so we are starting with an example which is taken from React official docs, and we will try to make sense of this using this example. So let's say there's a variable count with set count, that is fine, initialized with 0, and there is a handle click function corresponding to a button where if you click, then corresponding to that click, handle click shows an alert, but that alert is not shown at synchronously, rather there is a scheduled timeout, which means that after 3 seconds that alert is shown. Okay, and whatever the count variable is there, that count variable is shown here, and after that there is one another button. When you click on that, the count variable increments. So for example, you can see that here set count is called, and it increments the count variable, which means that if you click once, from 0 it becomes 1, if you click again it becomes 2. That is fine. Now let's try to see the behavior. When you click first on this button, so it will essentially look like this. If you click on this alert, then what is going to happen? An alert will this function set timeout inside set timeout, this callback, which essentially just contains an alert, which means that it will show what is the value of the count, but that is scheduled 3 seconds later, which means that when you click on alert button, this alert will be visible, but this alert will be visible after 3 seconds. What if I click on the alert and after 3 seconds that alert will be visible, but before that is visible, I click on this next a couple of times so that I change the value of count, and then you will see that even though you change, let's say you change this value to 2, 3, whatever, by clicking it a couple of times, then also you'll see that the alert will give you the original value, old value. So let's see that. So right now I'm going to click, and after clicking I'll press this button a couple of times. So I clicked, I pressed it a couple of times, it became 2, and after 3 seconds the alert comes, but that alert is showing you count 0, and that's what we are going to understand why. So what is happening is that you can understand that this handle click function, whenever it was called, then essentially this schedule was happening. This schedule set timeout scheduled a function, this thing, but you can understand that inside this whole thing all the values correspond to a particular render, which means that when you clicked handle click, at that time what was the render position? The render position was where that count is 0, and that everything everywhere here also the count was 0 initially, and when we clicked at that time, the schedule, whatever schedule happened there, also count was 0, right? Which means that schedule has happened corresponding to count 0, and that is the function with count 0, how it is scheduled. Okay, even though after that you double clicked here, and let's say the count becomes 2, that is fine, but you can understand that after that count value becoming 1 and 2, a couple of re-renderings of this component has happened, but you can understand that this is a function which is created every time, which means that this is essentially attached to a particular render. So every time this component renders, every time a new handle click is created, and that new handle click function is given to this. But when we clicked initially, that was corresponding to the first render which had count 0, and that's why that when that got executed, even if after some time the value of count is 2, but the actual scheduled thing which got executed had count 0, and that's why you can see count 0. Okay, now let's move forward. Now since I claim that this function is created in every render, which means that every time a new handle, every time this component renders, a new handle click function is created, and that is attached here, that is given to this alert, right? Which means that right now count is 2, which means that this handle click is created again with it's a timeout count 2 whatever, and then corresponding to this count 2 the handle click is assigned here. So in a similar manner, if I now click alert again, so let's say count 0 it was there, I do okay, and let's say now I click, then what is there? I click, then corresponding to the current render is count 2, corresponding to that the particular render has happened, corresponding to that particular function is created, and that handler function is given here. So I click, then corresponding to count 2 the schedule happens, scheduling set timeout happens, right? And again if after that I click a couple of times set timeout, then count will move forward, that is fine, but the schedule has happened as per the current render, and that's why if I click again and I let's say change a couple of times again count, you can see that count is still 2, not 5, right? But here after that, if I don't if I simply click on alert and I don't change any count, okay, then yeah, when it was clicked that time also count was 5, and that's why it works right now. But as you can see that after click on alert, if you change the value, that is not captured. So this is how it works, this is how that any function will work, right? And since right now we are using just a functional component, so that is how it is going to behave, and this should be the expected behavior, right? This is not a bug, this is how it works, right? However, so essentially what is happening, when you clicked corresponding to 5 and you changed something, then yeah it is 8, but you clicked corresponding to 5, and that's why count 5 should have been there. That is how it works. So imagine that you are showing that the current user is, and the current user is like 8, user ID is 8, right? Then if you click, then that 8 should be visible, right? But if you change in the meantime, that does not matter. When you clicked, what was the value? That 8, right? And that's why it should be visible. So it's not a bug, it's how it should be. However, in class-based component, you might think that actually you take directly values from this dot state, and that's why this dot state is updated, and that's why if you are not capturing that value, rather directly reading from this dot state, so those values will keep on coming to the from the latest value, and that's why you might seem that that is the way to go, right? But that is not the way. However, here if you are requiring something like that, if I click alert and then if I change it to let's say 13, then my alert should, at the time when the pop-up this alert is coming, at that time whatever is the current value that you want. So essentially what is happening, when you clicked, that is passed, that is passed, and then when you clicked something, then that is the future. So what if I want to read values from the future? That is what is happening, right? Because when you clicked, that was 10 only, and after that you change to 13, and then whatever you scheduled in that function, you want values from future. From future means corresponding to that past, the current is future, right? So what if you want that, if that is your requirement, then you can do something like this, that let's say I will use an instance variable, and in class components instance variable can be created using refs, we know that. So we are going to create a current a value. So for example, we can create let's say I don't know, like say latest count or something like that, right? Now this latest count is a ref variable, and we can start it with count, count is the initial value, right? But after that, what we can do is that every time this component renders, I want to capture the latest value in this latest count. Okay, so what I can do is that, let's say, have a normal use effect. Okay, and every time this renders, I want to update latest count dot current to count. Okay, and I'm just rendering it every time just to confirm that, yeah, whenever anything is changing, actually there should be a dependency array with count, but we'll come back to that. So right now, every time the thing is re-rendering, my this will be always up to date, right? And what if, even if it was scheduled in the past, but I print this like this, so latest count dot current. Okay, if I do that, then what is going to happen, that, yeah, since initially, let's say it was 0, I clicked it, and after that, let's say I change the value to 3. Okay, and after that, when this thing got scheduled, that time the count was 0, but I'm not printing count, I'm printing the latest count dot current. So by the time this became 2 or 3, that time, definitely, every time this set count ran, then every time this re-rendering happened, on every re-render this thing runs, and that's why my latest count dot current is actually the current value, right? And that's why now you can see that if I click on alert and change values, and then you'll see that the count is coming to whatever the current count is there, right? So again, you click and you change some value. Okay, then you'll see that whatever is the current value, that is coming, because essentially it is coming from that field which is instance variable latest count rather than directly count. So this is a way to solve it. Now you could say that, yeah, why to run this effect on every render, rather I should just provide count. And why providing count is necessary, because this whole thing depends on count. Okay, if you don't provide, then only the first render, so it just corresponding to 0, it will run, and after that this will not change. Okay, so if you do something like this, then does not matter what you change, it will keep having that same value, initial value 0, right? You don't want that, right? And that's why if the count changes, then my this effect should run. And if I remove this altogether, then also it's fine. But the problem is that in this case, every time whatever, so let's say there are a couple of more state variables, right? So every time anything changes, whether props or state, anything, every time this unnecessarily, this effect is running every time, right? Now if I do something like this, then only when count is changing, then only the effect is running, and then only this thing is updating. And that is what I want. Whenever count is changing, then only you need to run this line, right? And that's why this should be the perfect way, and this is how you can see that it is working fine. Okay, now this is fine, and you don't need to write this here, you can write this anywhere. So for example, you can write this here also, and then also it will work, right? Because you can understand that ordering does not matter, because if essentially that is just an effect, this is just an effect, and this effect will run after the render, and when you click, then doesn't matter, it's just a function call, and this variable you have defined, right? This variable you have already defined in the first render, so this variable is present when you click, so that should not be an issue. The more important point is that this might be a common use case, right? So what do we know? If there is a common use case, we can create a custom hook so that we don't need to write this again and again. Let's say in some other function also, in some other functional component also, the same requirement is there, right? So what we can do is we can create our custom hook. Let's call that custom hook, let's say use latest, and in that custom hook, simply we can copy this whole thing. Okay, and then we can simply do one thing, that whatever the initial, and then we can use this here. Let's say const latest count is equal to use latest count. Okay, so essentially whatever the count thing is there that you can pass here, right? And after that you can return the latest count. And now latest, sorry, this spelling mistake is there, this latest count, okay. And now you have the latest count here. That latest count you can use anywhere. Yeah, so now you can see that if you return latest count from here, and then that latest count dot current you can you can use here, then the behavior will be, if I click and then after that if I click a couple of times, then also I get the latest value. Okay, you note that you have to return the reference rather than reference dot current, because let's say if you return reference dot current, then you cannot use it like this, because again the same thing is happening. If I returned the latest value, but that latest value is assigned to a variable, and that variable is captured here. If that variable is captured, then still the same thing will happen, that when it was 0, then the variable 0 is captured, and then after that if I click and then click a couple of times, then actually the original captured value is coming, and that's why you don't have to return dot current, rather you have to return simply the reference, which is the actual thing, and it's an object inside whose current is. So here the captured thing is this reference, and wherever whenever the state is changing, that thing is automatically changing, and this use latest is ensuring that. And when this timeout is going to show the alert, then that corresponding that time we will see that what is the dot current, that current dot current will be up to date, and that's why it will give us the answer. Now let's consider a different situation, that yeah, let's see, I don't want the latest one, whatever the count was there, that's fine. So yeah, at the time of clicking, whatever the count was there, that is only I want, that is fine. But still you see one thing, that which I said, that whenever this is rendering again and again, this function is created again and again. This function is created again and again. Okay. What if you don't want that? Which means that unnecessarily this function, every time it is created, I know that this function just needs to be created when count is changing, otherwise everything is same, right? Let's say you are having a couple of more state variables, or let's say whatever props are getting passed, if those are changing, then also this thing is recreated. I don't want that, right? So we know that for that we can optimize it using use callback. Okay, so we can use callback, we can pass our function as an argument. Okay, and then after that we can also pass a dependency array. Okay, an array of dependency. But let's say right now I just pass empty array. We should pass count also, right? That is fine. But right now I'll show you that what happens when I simply pass empty array. If I pass empty array, which means that this whole function will be cached, and it will be cached for what? It will be memoized. Memoized is just another term for caching. Caching is essentially means saving the same value for later, reusing it rather than recreating it again. Okay, so when the first time it renders, then definitely this thing will be created, and that is only cached. And since I'm not passing anything in the dependency array, then that first time whatever the function was created, that handle click is that only, which means that after that, does not matter how many times you re-render, the function will be same. Okay, so you'll see here that what will happen, that I click and then after that I change it, then also it is 0. In fact, even if I click again, then also it is 0 only, because it never changes, right? This function is cached and it never changes. In order for this to change, I need to have count. I need to have count in the dependency array. Okay, and now you can see that, yeah, so I don't want to have any delay, so let's okay, let's keep it with delay. That is not an issue, but that will be expected, right? So if I click alert and increment, then it should come to 0 only. That is fine. But the more important point is that now if I click, it should come 2 rather than 0. Okay, so if now I click, then it should come 2, and that we can see it is coming 2 because the function is updated as soon as count is changing. So now it is cached, but cached only till the time count is not changing. As soon as the count is changing, the new variable is. But now we get the advantage that unnecessarily this handle click is not recreated every time on every re-render unnecessary, which means that even if count is not changing, something else is changing, some other state or some props are changing, then also this function is not recreated again and again. Okay, now one more thing, it's not just the case that you need to just have state variables or props in the dependency array. Okay, in fact you can have some other local variables also in the dependency array. Okay, some other, so for example some other functions or something. So let's do one thing. So let's say have another function called show alert. Okay, and let's move this thing to there, and now let's simply call show alert here. And now you might be thinking that I am not using count, so let's remove count from here. But now you'll see that again the same behavior will happen. So you can see that when I click and then I change, then it is 0, that is fine. But when I click again, then it is still 0. And what is the reason? The reason is that this is a cached function, that is fine. But what is that cached function? That is having show alert. Okay, but what is that show alert? That show alert variable is again captured from that render, which means that whatever the initial mount was there, this is empty array, which means that when the initial mount happened, at that time whatever was show alert, this thing, that is the only thing which is cached, and that point of time count was 0. Since count was 0, still that's why you can see that does not matter what is the value of count, always the inside the callback always this value is 0, and that's why because the show alert is the same, right? Why it is same? Because I know that with every render show alert is changing, but that does not matter. The show alert variable, when it was captured at the time of caching, this is the caching, when the caching was done at mount, because dependency array is now, which means that not only normal variables, these variables like these also you need to you also need to put in dependency array sometimes. In fact, if you click here, then it will give you a warning that you know what, it has a missing dependency show alert, and it is recommending you that this show alert should be part of your dependency array. Okay, and now there is another warning that you know what, if you are using something in dependency array, and now if you are using something in dependency array, then you should rather use callback rather than this, because again it knows that what is happening is that there is something which is depending on show alert. Now show alert unnecessary rendering should not be there, right? Because it is part of some dependency array, and that's why it is suggesting you that you better cache it. And now when you cache it, then you will use callback again. Inside that you will pass the function, and again it will suggest you that you should use count as a dependency array because it depends on count. Okay, and now it is done, and now you can see that the same behavior, which means that initially it will be 0, but when I click something and it changes to, let's say, 2, and now if I click, then the function is also updated. And why it is updated? Because we have shown that whenever the show alert is changing, update this callback. And when is show alert changing? Whenever count is changing. So as soon as we are clicking, count is changing. If count is changing, show alert is changing. If show alert is changing, handle click is changing. Okay, but again this is just artificially created example. Ideally this should be simply like this, and directly count should be here only. But just I wanted to show you that it's not that simply state variables and props are in dependency array, sometimes you might use some other variables, in fact functions also in the dependency array, and that is absolutely fine. Not only fine, in fact you should do that if you have a dependency like that.